Welcome back to our ocean studio of the Yawa vlog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. And of course, this handsome fellow here, he is Wookie. We're delighted to be here this morning uh, because of the storms that passed through here yesterday. It was a once in, well, maybe even a lifetime kind of an event here for the U.S. Virgin Islands. I think what we got was the telltale end of that. Bomb storm that wreaked so much havoc along the East Coast. It wasn't particularly cold. Temperatures were still in the high 70s, even low 80s throughout the day. But oh my, was it blustery? It was kind of like the prelim to a tropical storm, but of course, the wrong temperature for that and wrong time of year. And the rain, while consistent throughout the day, wasn't torrential as it would normally be. But a storm coming out of the west is unusual for us, as well as a storm that is, that intense during this time of year. So obviously, we were hunkered down yesterday and delighted to be back out in our ocean studio and broadcasting today. I will tell you though that I'm coming to you with a heavy heart. I am grateful that Yahweh held off in having me examine the darkest episode of my dear King's wonderful and brilliant life, at least up to this point, to this particular time. I am now covering the episode of Bathsheba, which is tragic and all of its intensity, all of its permeations, everything that Dode said and did um, pursuant to this was just horrendous. Uh, and I realized that that Dode is a was an exceptional man for 48 years of his life, from 8 years old when Yahweh first placed his Ruach spirit on him and anointed him Masiach, to the time that he was 56 years old. He lived his life in the center of Yah's brilliant spotlight. He was bold. He was courageous. He was articulate. He was a great prophet. He was a great defender of his people. He was engaged in doing wonderful things. And then it all fell apart. And when it fell apart, it crashed with intensity and reminds us somewhat of Moshe's experience, although Moshe's crash and burn came much sooner than Dode's. Moshe left, as we know, Mitzrayim, and around the time he was 40 years old, tried to help in an act of courage, really, in his youth, tried to help his people, defending them against the cruelty of the caste system, the religion and politics of Egypt. And then when Yahweh called him back at 80 years old, and he re-engaged in this, doing, reluctantly going back into Mitzrayim to relieve his people from the tyranny of civilization, really. Um, he didn't last a year in this new role as the liberator of his people before he had a meltdown and uh, actually cursed Yahweh for putting him in this position, saying that no one could do this job, and he asked God to kill him. Now, he went through the paces from that point on, doing some things that were, fairly extraordinary as it relates to getting his people to the promised land. But he was just going through the paces from that point, having really given up uh, on everything. So it is an exceedingly difficult job that Dode was placed in, as Moshe was placed in, and Dode persevered longer than Moshe by a long shot, and both of them much longer than I have in this spotlight as well. So I have some empathy for them and know how difficult the job is. But reading really how far Dode went to extinguish his light, mm, it's hurtful. It turns the stomach, and ultimately we know that Yahweh had a plan, and it's one of the most ingenious aspects of the whole story, one that I had not seen until this past week, which is that Yahweh had a means of keeping his story and his intent and his people on track for their reconciliation in the end, which did not interfere with free will, didn't interfere with the um, normal progression of time, and therefore didn't infringe on cause and effect, didn't make a great show so that the choice to know him or reject him would remain as it has always been, and gave him the opportunity to do as he said he would, which is to work everything through people and not do anything alone. So God found a way to do that, and it was actually hinted at for the first time. Well, the nature of these people was addressed in the greater and lesser luminary, and again in the trees of knowledge and of lives in the garden. Um, and their story was also told with the parting discussion that Yahweh had about what we are to do relative to our fathers and mothers going forward in our exit from the garden. But the first character that would be deployed in this way is a fellow whose name actually identifies his purpose. That would be Chanakh, known as Enoch. And the name means that he was trained, that he was prepared, that he was devoted, and then he was deployed to intervene in the way that he did, and then removed so that he could be dispatched and intervene at other times along the progression of time and events and places and people. There is one man and one woman for this calling. And they become as instrumental in the overall story as do the key characters like Moshe and Dode. So it is quite a story, and the way that God goes about telling it and bringing it to our attention, keeping it on track, is something that I have just come to appreciate. And had I not been introduced to the final word picture, which is a story we're about to complete, at least in the story of the 31st Marshal by itself. We will complete that later today. But had I not been introduced to it this way, seeing how Yahweh resolved the problem of his son's waywardness, it would have been a tough thing to recover from, because my life is devoted to restoring Dode's reputation with his people and with the world. And without knowing how God managed to restore his relationship with Dode once he crashed and burned, well, that would have been a difficult thing to do. So I'm telling you all of this so that you have some sense of my mindset as I do these programs. I try to be as transparent as is possible. It's one of the reasons we do these programs here in our Ocean studio, because you can see they're obviously being live streamed, and that this is a stream of consciousness for you, and that I'm trying to be as open and as vulnerable, really, as is possible in doing these programs in this environment, in this manner with you. So should you read something in my demeanor that is slightly different than what you have seen previously, you'll know what it is. And we have a Jack Spaniard that is visiting the set at the moment, and I do not like them, Sam I am. So if you see him swing back by, you will see me try to whack him out of the way. I have been bitten by them in the past, and it did not go well. All right, so now returning to the 8th Mizmor, which is the Song of Dode. And while it bears the number 8 currently, we're really not in a position to know whether or not it was 8 in the order that he revealed, or really when we now have a swatter that we can use should we need it. All right. So we don't know really what the order they were revealed. They could have been revealed at a very different order. I'm not able to do with the Dode's Mizmor what I was able to do with the Quran, which took that jumbled mess and reordered it chronologically by putting it into the context of Muhammad's life through the Hadith, because it's Dode talks about topics in a way that he literally telescopes time. The Wookiee is about to push my Coke off the end of the table here. That would be another mess. So he literally telescopes time in his Mizmor. So they're very difficult to anchor in time. So we don't know when each was revealed, but they all tell us something that is extraordinary. And I think that many of them now are show the benefit of the intervention that we had with him some 3,000 years ago, so that he would recognize who he was, what his purpose was, what his calling was, what he must achieve in life, and why it was important that he reconcile his relationship with Yahweh that he had fractured through the Bathsheba incident. So this continues. Therefore, you have made him, he's speaking of mortal man, somewhat diminished, withholding something. And this is really interesting, of course, withholding something from God, and yet you surround and enveloped him with honor and respect, with an abundance of riches, and with a powerful presence and a glorious reward, a kabod, along with the most appealing attributes, valuable qualities, and useful aptitudes. This is such a powerful statement and so remarkably insightful. It's the same conclusion that I have drawn, but the difference is I drew it after considering everything Yahweh had to say, and then deducing what I thought were the most rational conclusions from it. In this case, Dode was inspired as a prophet to state this emphatically. So it does validate some things that I have shared with you over this past year through the Yahweh blog, and through the past 24 years through the Yada Yahweh series. And should you wish to follow along, we are concluding, we're in the final episodes of what will be our comprehensive journey through this. This was volume 1 of the series called Coming Home. It's a voice, and it is I don't know, my recommendation for everyone to read it. I think you'll gain so much more from it reading it. Now, there is an advantage of listening to it because I augment the text and make commentary, as I am right now, way beyond anything that I have written, and I bring the text up to date in the sense that my insights are now shaped by what I have learned since I last wrote and edited that, which probably the last edit pass would have been 2 to 3 years ago. And the amount that we've learned just in the last 6 months is so astonishing that I can bring those updated insights to you spontaneously as part of the Yahweh blog. But to read the text is wonderful. In fact, I was just thinking a matter of a half an hour ago that when Yahweh says, I want you to go to this vlog format, and I'll go here in a minute, return to my commentary on this text, which I think you'll find interesting. But when Yahweh asked me to do this, it was in December of a full year plus ago, to go from being a full-time translator and writer to a vlogger. I was skeptical at first because, this is a much more vulnerable experience. And, my entire exposure with Yahweh prior to this had been reading what he had others write, and then sharing what I was deducing from them in writing, recognizing that a written account is far more credible, that a written account is far more has far greater longevity, and that God chose writing because it was the most reliable, consistent, means of communication and the best way for him to demonstrate prophecy so that he could show that he, in fact, inspired these words because he has a written legacy of things that would transpire centuries after he committed them to writing, proving the validity of his inspiration and that this is his testimony. And I like the fact that with the written word, you were empowered, which means that, particularly if you're reading it online, you can go to yadaya.com. All the books are free at yadaya.com. You can copy and paste the genitive form of the Hebrew text. In this case, that opening word, not wa, therefore, but you have made him somewhat diminished, withholding something. It's from Chashir, and Chashir Hu Ma'at. You can copy and paste each of those three words into the search engine of your choice and validate that my translation is accurate. So, my only hope would be that you would be as thorough as I am, which means that I don't use one, but many. If you just use one, you're probably going to be geared to Strong's since it's the most prevalent. But Strong's is written to justify the King James, so you have to be careful with it. But there are, when I'm doing this, I will examine 10 to 15 different lexicons, and I will strip the word of its diacritical markings that the rabbis added in the 11th century CE, so that you can consider every potential nuance that can be derived from the letters of each word as they were written. And then I will go to the pictographic characters and say, what do they have to say that would be illustrative in understanding the text. And I will also turn to the actionable root of each word to analyze it as well, so that you might know the intended meaning that was originally ascribed the term from God. So I would hope that you would be as thorough as I am, but you're, welcome. And I think in fact, I know I'm the only translator ever to give the reader the tools needed to validate or criticize my translations. Doing so with a remarkably innovative style that heretofore had never existed previously, not only in its amplification, but also in its veracity. So, having done this for all of that time and now asked to speak, I noticed that there were a lot of things that were different. One is that now that I was learning so much by going back all the text and having really the floodgates of understanding open to us over this past year, that if I had done what I had done in the past, which is to go back and update the books every time I learned something new or wanted to edit something out that was now passé based upon a greater understanding, to go through 35 books, 25,000 pages, and make the series of changes based upon what we had learned would take 2 years. It's a long process. I was happy to do it. I wanted to have the books be as current and complete and accurate as possible, but it was a 2-year endeavor. And in this case, we are learning so much at such a pace that it would be like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. You're going to have crews at both ends, and as soon as you finish, you go back the other way. We would never get anything new written or anything new translated, because we'd just be improving what was already there. And so what I realized this morning is that not only does the Yahweh vlog and these live streams give us the opportunity to share with you the most recent insights, things that we may have only considered hours before the presentation. They also do something else that I just think is, this is another realization I thought was helpful, which is that even now, if I could just snap my fingers and instantly we had all the books, each of them, right from An Introduction to God, volume 1, 2, and 3, and Yada Yahweh series 1 through 9, if they were all updated, even the observation series 1 through 5, with the fullness of what we've come to understand, they wouldn't be understandable. You see, to some extent, as a reader, you need to come to this understanding as we did. You need to go through the process. You can't start with perfect and complete understanding. That's not how we learn. You don't start in kindergarten with calculus. You work up to it, and this is the same thing that's here. It's that if I'm able in the most recent books, and I am in the most recent books, but also in these programs, take you beyond where we have been so that you can show the growth. I can show the growth and understanding, then that is a much better part of this process than otherwise. So, I know that there are many covenant members who are reading books that I wrote 5 and 10 years ago, and they are learning things that they never saw previously, because that's what we all do. The more we're exposed to Yah's testimony, the more we come to understand it. But they also know that there are things that I'm saying now that are way, way, way beyond what I might have interpreted back in the day. And that is all part of the process. And you should make this journey along with me as I made it, as opposed to just, starting with calculus and saying, well, we'll just dispense with simple mathematics. It wouldn't be prudent. So in this case, I'm very comfortable in taking you beyond where I have been previously. So this reads, therefore, so you have made, he's speaking to Yahweh, this is Dod, his beloved son, you have made him, mankind, somewhat diminished, withholding something from you. See, more than just a little bit diminished, where God says that he created us in his image. The word that he used for image, and I've shared this previously, is like comparing a blueprint to a building. The blueprint tells the builder how to build the building, but you can roll the blueprint up. Here's this house. I can roll up the entire blueprint for this house, and 20 sheets of paper, and it comes into a nice little roll, and you can put it in your hand, and yet that doesn't have the substance of one of the stones that I put on the wall for this house, much less the dimensionality of this whole thing. As it goes from one corner to another and builds up from the ground to the top of the roof. There is to go from 2 dimensions, which is what a blueprint is, to 3 dimensions is actually an infinite increase. And in our case, Yahweh created us in 3 dimensions, stuck in the 4th dimension, the ordinary flow of time. When he is liberated, not only in time, the 4th dimension, but also the 5th, the 6th dimension as well. And I think that the universe, based upon what we perceive of it as the 5% that we can recognize, and all we can do is the math, but we have no understanding of what the repulsive force is or the attractive force that we call dark energy and dark matter, that the universe is actually 6 dimensions. And this would play somewhat into what they call string theory. And that Yahweh, to create a 6-dimensional universe, must be 7 dimensions minimally. You have to be a dimension beyond that which you create to create something of this magnitude. Otherwise, what you're doing is rearranging what already exists. Like when I took the blueprint that I drew for this house and then built the house based upon that blueprint, I had to use materials that already existed. I just repurposed those materials, if you will, to create this house. That is very different than creating a universe out of nothing. The light and the energy and the matter and all of those sorts of things, and then life. So it's a very different thing. And in the case of God, when he gave humankind a nasama, which is a conscience, the ability to reason, to know the difference between right and wrong, good and bad, that which is productive and counterproductive, he created us such that we had the capacity to know him, to think like him, to respond to him, to even be trusted by him with that conscience. But it still meant that we are a huge distance from him. And ultimately, God would never have created humankind and given us a nasama conscience. Well, now we see my Wookiee has chased away my bug zapper if the wasp comes back, but he was insistent that he get his share of Wookiee's pig's ear. That's what this happens to be. That means that Wookiee is definitely not kosher. But what does it say? And Tabadim, you can eat whatever you want, so long as you're thoughtful about it. It's not going to change anything relative to your soul. So here we are, and I want everyone to have an understanding that as distant as Wookiee and I are in terms of our overall capabilities, God and man are far greater distance still, because each incremental increase from 3 dimensions through 4, 5, and 6, ultimately to 7, is an infinite increase in choices and opportunities and scope of everything, and power and capability. So God could not, should not, did not start us off as a 6-dimensional creature so that we would have total access to the entire universe. I mean, black holes and quasars and supernova and access to DNA and all of this sort of thing, because had he done so without first knowing that we would listen to him, that we would consider his testimony, that we would engage with him in a way that is appropriate, and that we could demonstrate that we could be trusted in with that kind of power, God would have been foolish to let us off of this planet and out of 3 dimensions. So he is now working to allow us, if you will, to prove that we indeed can listen, that we indeed can engage. We can be observant and responsive, and then once observant and responsive, when we make mistakes, that we can learn from them and grow from them and become better as a result of having fallen and gotten back up. So this is why God created us at the distance he did in terms of dimensions from where he is, and what he's expecting from us to trust us to the degree that he's willing to elevate us from a dimensional point of view all the way up to where he is as God. So that's what Dode is talking about here. And so what he's also saying is that beyond all of this, well, we are lesser dimensions than God, and therefore infinitely to the power of 4 less than God, from the 3rd to the 7th dimension. That God has nonetheless surrounded us and enveloped us with kabod. And kabod is a really loaded term. Kabod means honor and respect, abundance, riches, power, glorious reward, personal significance, to be extraordinary and enormously valued. So in a universe where even our galaxy, the Milky Way, is insignificant, and our sun is insignificant in that Milky Way, and our planet is insignificant compared to our sun, and that we are insignificant compared to our planet. With all of that, we are still the most essential aspect of creation, the most empowered, the most respected aspect of creation. At least we have that potential. So Dode is saying that we can be kabod. Now, Dode was the most kabod of God. At least he was for his first 56 years, from I think even before God met him at 8 years old. Yahweh obviously knew him and developed an esteem for him. So we could even say beyond 48 years that Dode was really extraordinary in his walk with God for 56 years, 48 of which we know the story because he was anointed and called the Mashiach at 8. And during that time, he has had every opportunity to show his abundance, his great respect that he had earned with God, that his tremendous personal significance, and what he is saying here, that we humans have the same opportunity, as was the case with Dode, so is the case with us. That's the whole story from beginning to end. As was the case with Dode and Kabod, so is the case with us. So that we, if we engage with God, if we are observant, we are good listeners, we're responsive, and participate along with God, making a contribution to His family and to His interests, and then engage in such a way that even if we make mistakes, that we learn as we go and show ourselves reliable, then God's in a position that He can increase our kabod. It goes from being potential to actual. So we are conceived with the potential to be kabod, and it is our response to Yah that determines whether that potential becomes reality. And he goes on to say, along with the most appealing attributes, valuable qualities, and useful aptitudes, hadar. We humans have been given, again, the potential to express ourselves in marvelous ways. We have aptitudes and attributes that can be really significant. Now we have a happy Kara in addition to a Wookiee, although they may fight over this. But Wookiee jumped off the table, so therein is the rub. Dode had attributes at 8 years old that caused him to be exceedingly endearing to God. God says, he's my chosen one, and I have chose him for reasons that are different from the way that men typically value other men and women. So if we want to be valued by God, it is good to look at those 56 years where Dode was so exemplary, and to look at the aptitudes and attitudes that he expressed. And he was passionate about Yahweh. He was an exceedingly good student of the Torah. He was articulate. He was bright. He made logical connections. He was engaged. He was active. He was doing the stuff of Yah. And so we can learn from him that these are attributes and attitudes that God really likes. And when he became less than what he had been, and God said, you're a real disappointment now, we can also find that it is possible for us to squander our attitude and our attributes, and to squander our potential. That is why they had the great intervention of the last word picture, where we went in and reacquainted Dode with what he was supposed to be, what he could be, what he would become. But this is the nature of humanity. I look at us now collectively, and I see a completely squandered state. I think that in a world of 8 billion people, there may be fewer than 8,000 that have the potential to know Yahweh, the potential to recognize and accept what he is offering by accepting what he wants in return. I think that's at the very best, 8,000 amongst 8 billion, about 1 in a million. The rest of people have really squandered who they are and what they can achieve. I was having a very intelligent conversation earlier today by email with an exceedingly bright man who is mathematically driven. His mind works in mathematical equations. And he likes to spar with AI because, well, when you're dealing with mathematical concepts, AI is actually fairly astute. And, it's a fun way for him to have conversations. And he'll always turn those to the logic of the Torah using my translations of it and analysis of it, and saying, now that we're being logical, why don't you look at these translations and these conclusions, and see if, in fact, you can either challenge them or support them. And on this particular analysis, he had the AI consider what I have shared and learned from Dode's Mizmor regarding the fact that Dode was the one who was crucified in 33 CE, so that Dode is the person that all of the attributes and credit that was stolen by Paul and given to Jesus actually belong. And the AI went right down through it and said, yep, all of this is, there's no other way to come to any other conclusion than Jesus is nothing but a counterfeit of Dode, and that Dode spoke of all of this and his role in it 1,000 years before he endured it. So AI for a session can do those kinds of things. But then my response to my friend is to say, AI and I are enemies. Yeah, I think it was interesting that you had the AI go through the process and say, yep, it's totally reasonable and rational in his conclusions that Dode is the person that was counterfeited to create Jesus, and that Dode proved that he was the one who endured this for this purpose through these prophecies, because they are so exacting. But the fact is that the next time you engage AI, it will return to the popularity myth, because that's where the money is, that's where control is. You don't make money with these huge investments in AI unless you can appeal to a large audience, and you appeal to a large audience by reinforcing the lies of religion and politics and conspiracy and the things that men have told themselves to believe over the years. And so a lone voice who says, no, that's all false, is going to be rejected in favor of the collective delusion. That's the nature of the business. And AIs are, billion-dollar projects. So I just was honest with him and say, I'm not a person that's going to change my view on AI. I think that AI is an enemy of the truth. They are an enemy of Yahweh. That they, by promoting the popular agenda, sequester understanding of Yahweh's words and his testimony and what he is offering. And that as a result, I can have 20,000 posts on Facebook and have 2,000 followers, because AI determines who can see what I have shared, and that there is no way to train AI otherwise. And I said, I appreciate you trying, but he says, yeah, you're right, that AI has been programmed with this bias, and that it's never going to go from one session to another, having learned, and therefore promoting what is true as opposed to what is popular. And I've said that my other issue is that AI keeps humans in a position where they can never capitalize on this, so that their kabod remains potential but never actualized. And the reason for that is that people are turning more and more to AI to monitor their classes, to read their textbooks, to write their essays, to take their tests. And AI is learning nothing in the process that is helpful to it, and the person is squandering the opportunity to learn and to expand their ability to think, to do research, to make the connections necessary to understand. And then you have the second part of what is human taken away, which is the value of work. So the human becomes less observant, less thoughtful, less engaged, and less productive, destroying everything that makes us uniquely human, and restricting our kabod. So I said, that the matter of fact is that AI and I will be adversarial right to the very end, just as I'm adversarial with Paul and Muhammad, the founders, and Akiba, the founders of the Abrahamic religions, just as I am with Marx and the promotion of socialism, just as I am against MAGAs and the conspiratorialists. That is my job, and I'm going to continue to do it, because that is the kind of aptitude and attitude that Yahweh is seeking. This was from Lyrics to Sing, Psalm 8:5. So Yahweh made us in his image, and thus very much like himself, just with vastly less power and a finite lifespan, currently capable of operating in fewer dimensions, all for our own good and for his good. That said, the abilities that we were given are more than sufficient for us to know our Maker and engage in a meaningful relationship with him. And once that occurs by way of the covenant and the Moedim, Yahweh uses the Bikurim and Shabua harvest to mitigate these differences with us, enriching and empowering our souls tenfold and then twice tenfold. That is what God is promising. So while we don't much act like it, we are the pinnacle of creation. And indeed, based upon the nature of his testimony, Yahweh has given us the capacity to think, to closely examine and carefully consider not only his words, but the universe that he has created and make the connection between the two. It is apparent that Yahweh thinks more of us than we think of ourselves. And that, my friends, is why we're going to experience the Great Reset. Humankind has so squandered this kabod, this opportunity for distinction that Yahweh has offered, that the only way to resolve this is that after causing the fall of man 6,000 years ago and giving us the opportunity to get it right, that 99.9999999% of humanity has failed in this regard. And so Yahweh said, but you haven't all failed. And I'm going to prove to you that it can be done and that somebody can complete this mission. And that mission is to be observant, to be a good listener, to pay attention to what God is saying, to be thoughtful about it, to engage based upon what he has said and act accordingly, and then learn, and while learning, grow and developing character such that when we make mistakes, we learn from them and grow as a result of them. And part of that is this realization that humanity, particularly because of religion, has this incredibly stupid idea of that God's looking for perfection. He's not. That would be boring as hell, and we'd have no way to grow in character or worth if that were the case. And when God, if he wanted perfection, he could create a bunch of mini-me's and he'd be bored out of his mind. So no, he's looking for imperfections, because not looking for imperfection in the sense of, aha, I got you on that one. No, he wants us to constantly have obstacles to overcome, mistakes to correct, teetering and falls to rise above, because it is when we do these things that we not only learn from them and become stronger as a result, but we prove ourselves reliable and trustworthy and dependable and interesting. And so this is what God is trying to achieve with us. And it's a very different understanding than has, of course, been perlayed by religious thought, or I should say, religious beliefs. So beyond this, ponder the distinction, indeed, the honor of being invited to be part of Yahweh's family, to become sons and daughters of God. Imagine the enrichment and the empowerment, the enlightenment, and the emancipation he envisions for us. The covenant's benefits provide us with an abundance of riches. We inherit the entire universe, 2 trillion plus galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars and scores of planets and moons, and all of them, who knows how many opportunities for life, and the ability to actually travel between them. Because I'm here to tell you, it's all out there. You can see some twinkling stars at night. You can see the marvelous pictures that are rendered by the Hubble telescope, and then the more recent scopes that are just so prolific and expanding what we can see all the way back towards creation. James Webb is particular spectacular in this regard. But we are never going to survive on another planet in our solar system, much less leave our solar system. Never going to happen. Even if we had a million years to progress, and we have 7.5 years to digress before God does this reset, that we have 0% possibility of leaving our solar system. All of the, the great Star Wars and Star Treks and all of these kinds of series with their warp speed and going off and visiting other planets within our galaxy and other galaxies is just total and complete nonsense. It cannot be done. The distances are too great, and nothing can go faster than the speed of light. You can't even approach the speed of light. So here we are. We're on this beautiful blue marble. It's so conducive to life, and yet here we are squandering it. But the whole idea of bringing us back to Eden, after a few of us have come to meet Yahweh's expectations and in the terms of being observant and being engaged and being thoughtful and being reliable after being responsive, we're going to have the opportunity to take a significant number of people as mortals, purified first, into a return where the entire earth is transformed into the Garden of Eden. And we're going to have 1,000 years to demonstrate that many souls can earn God's respect and trust in this regard. And then we'll all go off and explore the universe. And I think it's fairly certain that we will even have the opportunity to create a new one. And not only investigate both, but even have the opportunity to conceive life and to have a great time with the God over eternity as a result. So truth be known, we were created as a living proverb, as a word picture. We can stand upright. We can free our hands to do as we choose, write books, or control the words on a screen so that I can share my thoughts with you in this regard. We have opposable thumbs to fashion and use tools, and the ability to turn the pages of a book. Without the opposable thumb, I could not have picked this up. Without my opposable thumbs, I couldn't read this and share it with you. We were literally a living proverb. We have these attributes that such that we can use verbal and written communication to expound upon what we come to know and understand and share it with others. We are afforded ears to listen, eyes to see, mouths to speak, and brains to process it all. We're given a conscience to discern right from wrong and free will to respond accordingly. Vulnerable, we must use our intellect to survive. We choose our life partners, conceive and raise children in a familial setting, sheltering and protecting them, parenting them by teaching and guiding them, with mothers and fathers contributing in different ways, such that everything about us literally serves as a word picture of God's intent through the covenant family. The king writes, "You have provided him," speaking again of humans, "with proverbs to allow him to exercise his free will." Mashal. I've just, we're concluding a series. We'll do it this afternoon on what's called the last Mashal. Word picture. It is a proverb. You have shared vivid and memorable messages with mankind, giving him the ability to be in charge and to have wisdom and dominion. Within the accomplishments, that's interesting, by the way, that mashal has two meanings that seem unrelated at first. The one that is best known is that a mashal is a word picture. It is a way to express ideas effectively using words so that they're so richly and vividly communicated, they inspire knowledge and understanding. But the second is to lead, to govern, to engage in a way that shows a leadership and the ability to help shape the lives of others. And so the more we learn from these word pictures, the more able we are to take that next step and to enhance the lives of others and to create a community that is devoted to Yahweh because we are observant of Yahweh, thoughtful of Yahweh, and responsive to Yahweh, as well as seen as reliable to Yahweh. And it says within these accomplishments, Mashah gets right back down to it. Mashah is our work, our energy, our overall effort, our contribution. Mashah is from Ashah, which means to act and to engage. So what God is saying, and this was the problem with Adam in the garden, we must begin by being observant, by paying attention, by closely examining and thoughtfully considering everything that is around us, including God's testimony to us, and specifically his testimony to us. And then we need to engage. We need to ma'asha. We need to, and masha just means to ponder the implications of work. God wants us to engage. He values work. He is not looking for people who want entitlements. He is not this idea that if you just believe he will give you salvation is completely foreign to the nature of God. He does not want to be around a bunch of deadbeats. A one-sided relationship is an oxymoron. God wants us to be observant and then engage, to ashah, and then to ma'ashah. Prior to that is to contemplate what it means to act and engage and make a contribution. And he says, with your hands. With our hands is how we influence things around us, whether it's by sharing words, by typing them in on a keyboard, or writing a letter, or picking up tools and building a home, for example, or arranging this studio here that we're using to communicate the Yahweh blog. So he says, you have placed, for a time being, you have established and setting everything under his feet. The Mizmor lyrics to sing Psalm 8:6. Yes, all of the potential is under our feet here on earth. This is just a marvelous environment that is conducive to life, that is sheltering for the things of life, such that when God restores the entire earth to the conditions of Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, we're going to have this marvelous opportunity underneath our feet to launch ourselves up into the stars. It is the springboard from which we become everything that we were meant to be. So for the past 6,000 years, mankind has, ruled over the earth. We have reached for the stars, although we have barely stepped on the moon. It has been our planet to impose our will as we have desired. And while we've made a bloody mess of things, and it's getting progressively worse, and the next 7 years are going to be hell on earth, God has seldom intervened to restrain our ambitions. During this time, and with regard to all of his gifts, life, a conscience, and free will, the greatest gift of all has been his devotion to us, something he has expressed in his Torah and through his covenant. He has placed the means to become ever more like him, to be expanded and empowered and enabled and enriched and emancipated right beneath our feet. Of Mashalhu, you have provided him with proverbs and allowed him to exercise free will. Dode knows of what he speaks because he was both subject and beneficiary, inspiration and scribe. Years ago, we began translating the sixth Mashal, this proverb for understanding and observations, in the first volume, which became a 5-volume set. It became readily obvious that the theologians were wrong, that Dode was the author of most of these, although, I'm not precluding Solomon from writing some of what his father had shared with him and what he learned from his father, although he was only 12 years old when his father's first life ended, and Dode was far from the man that he had been in the first 56 years when Solomon was born. So these are the shared devotions of his beloved son, and what we're just becoming able to recognize, really from the insights of the final word picture, the 31st proverb or mashal, is that many of them, in fact, I've shared this previously, I know certainly that the first of them are all written from the perspective of a mother and father, a husband and wife, and their son relative to their relationship with Yahweh. And so it is a mother expressing her love for and appreciation of not only her son and her God, but also her husband. And that is family advice in this regard. And we're just now coming to know who the husband and wife are, who the mother and father are, who the son is in this situation. And if time permits, we'll go back through all of them and reestablish a more comprehensive understanding based upon all we have learned. Dode continues, flocks of sheep, Shona, small grazing mammals, and thousands of domesticated cattle. Now, there's more to this. When we see Dode speak of Shona, he's speaking of himself as the Lamb of God and as the ram leading and protecting the flock. And when he speaks of Aleph and any one of the many words also for cattle, he's speaking of the bull, his partner in accomplishing all of this. And one of the things that was so interesting today, as my friend sent me his experience with AI, coming to appreciate my conclusion was correct, and that Dode is the person who was actually crucified in 33 CE, upon which the myth and counterfeit of Jesus was conceived. It constantly referred back to my translations of the 22nd Mizmor that Dode had written, the 22nd Psalm. And there's a line in it that it cited. And it's the one where it speaks of Dode ultimately receiving a resolution for everything he was trying to achieve by the horns of the bull. And that ours is a collaborative effort. I think that's in the 21st verse, and something that we'll go back and examine just how insightful that is, that the very Lamb of God fulfilling Pesach was ultimately absolved of his indiscretion and returned to his proper dignity and renown by the horns of a bull that stood up for him. So there are Aleph, there's thousands of cattle. Aleph is both means thousands or a thousandfold, and it is bull of them, and also of the wild animals of the open environs. The birds of the sky and the fish of the sea, they extend along the way of the seas. Sea is also a metaphor for Goyim, and it is really interesting here that I was writing today, speaking of Dode's horrible indiscretion with Bathsheba and the way that it played out in the death of a man named Light of Yah, by way of a general whose name is Yahweh is Father. And when you read everything that Dode said and did in this episode, what you come to conclude is that the most Yehud of all men, the man whose name is emblazoned in Yehud. Jews are not Jews, they're Yehud, and in the plural, Yehudim. And Yehud is a compound of two names, Yahweh's name and Dode's name. It means Yahweh's beloved. And so the most Yehud of all men became like a run-of-the-mill goy. He did everything that the goy did that God says don't emulate their ways. And so the most Yehud of all men became like every other goy, such that it would take a goy who is the most Yehud of all goy to restore the relationship between Yahweh and Yehudim, and particularly this Yehud. It is a brilliant plot twist by the ultimate storyteller. So all of this serves to reflect our place among the living. We are all animals, sheep and cattle, um, rams and bulls, birds and fish, and yes, we humans too are animated with mortal souls. Yet God created the others for our benefit. The manner in which we treat them, well, of course, speaks volumes about us, doesn't it? That does not mean that we should not be nourished by them, or that because that was clearly Yah's intent. It simply means that we ought not kill for sport. We ought not rob animals of their habitat. We should not allow any animal to suffer needlessly. And yet, there is one animal, the lamb, which at the right time, for the right reason, when prepared and consumed the proper way, can nourish our bodies and save our souls. And then there's the second that was listed here, the bull, that can also purge the religiosity and politics out of the mortal remnant of Israel, so that they're prepared to re-enter Eden and have another opportunity, a second chance at proving their worth. So Yahweh has honored us above all of the rest of his creation, conceiving life and giving us this marvelous blue planet. And for that, we ought to be appreciative and grateful. At the very least, we ought not irritate and disrespect him by attributing our place in the universe to the gods that men have crafted, to the likes of Jesus Christ, the Holy Ghost, Hashem, the Lord, Allah, Buddha, Vishnu, Brahma, Mother Earth, Mary, the Queen of Heaven, or nature. These are things that do nothing but agatize God. There is one God, and he has but one name, and that name is Yahweh. Yahweh, Edom, our upright pillar and firm foundation. How awesomely magnificent is your name in the entirety of the material realm and land. And with this, we're going to conclude our program today. Not only is it beginning to rain on me, and I want to cover up our equipment, we have quite an investment in it and want it to continue to serve all who would listen in this regard. But what a marvelous recognition. Yahweh is God's one and only name. It has been my distinct honor and privilege to bring it back to you, to be the first, not only to recognize that this is the proper pronunciation of Yod He Wah He, but to prove it. And the first volume of An Introduction to God, one of those books behind me on that shelf, I was able to demonstrate emphatically, and began just very simply by saying that God revealed that his name was based on the verb Haya, and then he revealed this to us in his Torah, and between Torah and Haya, you learn every nuance about how to pronounce Yahweh's name. And so it has been one of my life's great achievements to restore the power and dignity and the recognition of Yahweh's name. He is exceedingly great, and his name is awesomely magnificent. To know it is to at least begin the process. Oh, we have Kara. No, Kara is deciding that she was going to chew on one of the cables to the camera. So at least she listened to my instruction. This is better than most people will do. And she has backed away. So that is a good sign. But Yahweh's name is ultimately empowering. To Yada, which is to know Yahweh, is the first step in developing a relationship with God. No one will ever enter God's presence, ever enter heaven, that does not Yada Yahweh. So it is the approach that we all must take if we want to be part of God's family. So I thank you very much. I thank the weather for holding off, so we were able to get this program in. I thank you, dear Kara, for not chewing on the cable anymore and being a good listener. My dog Asher here at my feet as well. Although I think Wookie has walked away now that I squandered the remaining of his chew toy. But nonetheless, I have enjoyed spending this hour with you. I hope you've gained something from it. I hope that I've been able to share it, what I have come to learn from Yahweh in a way that enhances your life, enhances your understanding of Yahweh and our place in His universe that He has given to us, so that we, from our stance in this material realm, can literally launch ourselves into the stars and up to heaven. Thank you for listening. Good day.